That concludes questions for oral answer. Would some honourable member care to move that the House takes note of miscellaneous business?
I so move.
Dr Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In 2015, a government-owned railway company in New Zealand is proposing to remove electrification for the main trunk line and replace electric railway with diesel engines. Nothing perhaps epitomises the disastrous climate change policy of this government more than that one single fact. The fact that 15 years into the 21st century, this government's own railway company is proposing to remove electrification from the main trunk line and replace it with diesel engines. Climate change is the defining issue of this century. It is the issue which will define the judgment of history on this government and on all of us in this House as to whether we take action on climate change. And yet, in New Zealand, our net greenhouse gas emissions have increased by 42% from 1990 to 2013, a 42% increase in net emissions, a 21% increase in gross greenhouse gas emissions. Nothing more could define a failure than those numbers. And it's for that reason that today we did something different with Question Time, which was we crowdsourced a series of questions about climate change, because we thought it was important that the people of New Zealand are given the opportunity to directly question the government on the issue of climate change. And some of those questions related to the issue of the government railway company removing electrification, which of course is an incredibly stupid and backward move. But of course it's driven, I don't necessarily blame KiwiRail for it, it's actually being driven by the government's own policies. They gutted the emissions trading scheme and removed a price on carbon, so of course it makes sense at some level economically. And of course the other impact of the government's policies is that we now have twice the level of deforestation of plantation forests than we have of afforestation, even though the Minister for Climate Change didn't know this and put out a press statement saying that we were that we were planting forests faster than we were knocking them down. In fact, the truth is the exact opposite, and the Minister for Climate Change had to issue a press release correcting his statement. What we've seen in New Zealand is that not only have we gutted the emissions trading scheme, but the government is now subsidising the exploration for fossil fuels. This is in a world where we know that we've already found far more fossil fuels than we can possibly afford to burn if we want to stay under 2 degrees of warming. What could be more insane? What could be madder than using $50 million of taxpayer money to subsidise searching for and the production of fossil fuels that we know we cannot burn without cooking the planet? But that is this government's policy, to subsidise the exploration for fossil fuels with taxpayer money, even though we cannot burn the existing fossil fuels that we have already discovered. Mr Speaker, all around the world, people are divesting out of fossil fuels. Even in New Zealand, Victoria University has divested from fossil fuels. Dunedin City Council has just announced they're divesting from fossil fuels. Christchurch City Holdings and so many others are taking leadership on the issue of climate change because the government won't. Because the government is embracing the 1950s, embracing diesel trains, embracing deforestation, and doesn't seem to get it about climate change. That's why we crowdsource questions about climate change today, so the voices of ordinary New Zealanders could be heard in this House. That's why others are having to take the lead on climate change all around New Zealand by divesting out of fossil fuels. This is not only an ethical and moral issue, it's also an economic issue. This is one of the great economic opportunities of the 21st century, and it is passing New Zealand by because we have a government that does not recognise it. We have a government that is embracing simple commodities when the whole world is embracing the clean tech, green tech revolution, and yet you wouldn't even know it from New Zealand because we have a government which is firmly facing back into the middle of the 21st century, even though we're 15 years into the 21st century. Climate change is a compelling issue of our time. It's going to require leadership from ordinary people because we have a government that will not take action on climate change. In fact, is accelerating New Zealand's net greenhouse gas emissions. We know that when it came to votes for women, it was ordinary New Zealanders that had to take the lead in order to make that happen. We know that when it came to mining in national parks, it was ordinary people that stopped this government doing it, and we know on climate change it will be ordinary people once again.
Honourable Amy Adams.
Mr. Speaker, you've got to